My name is Dawn Hetty. I co-chair the FileMaker practice at Selient Consulting. I've been doing this a very long time, and I'm certified basically back to version 8. I wrote a book a while ago, along with Bob Bowers and some other folks at Selient. We haven't upgraded it in a while. Not sure we're going to. Let's just move on with the session. Got a lot to cover. I've basically spent the better part of 2 days trying to fit 5 pounds in a 3-pound bag, so I think I'm there, but we'll see. So tackling sync. This is basically the outline of this solution. Sync is a very broad topic. So we're gonna narrow it down a bit to talk about a common use case that's happening now for all of us with FileMaker Go, and that's I want to take some of my work offline on an iPad and go somewhere remote where I can't get Wi-Fi connection or a cellular connection, or I want to go into a dense building or a hospital or some other place where I'm not allowed to be connected. And I need to do some work, and then when I get back to civilization somewhere, I want to post that work back up. So we're not talking about the kind of sync today that is, I've been developing in FileMaker, I've been running my business FileMaker for 10 years, and I want to take the entire thing and put it on my iPhone and have it with me at all times. We're not talking about that kind of, like we're keeping everything literally in sync. We're talking about getting the work you need, doing the work, and getting it back. So we're going to look at the things you need to consider when you decide to tackle sync. And we're going to talk about some strategies for simplifying it and some methodologies for scripting. And we're going to do demonstrations of some custom stuff and some commercial sync tools. And along the way, we'll talk about advantages and shortcomings of the different approaches. And then at the end, there's about 6 resource slides. So if I'm running long and I don't get to them, make sure you look at them. There's a lot of good resources there. I'll be showing it. Okay. So to start off with, Jobs Mobile. Jobs Mobile is our file that we're going to deploy to an iPad. It could also be deployed to a phone, or it could be deployed even to a laptop. You know, laptops can be remote devices. They had been for a long time before we had iPads. So the mobile app is on the iPad. There's a master app that is up on our hub, which is a FileMaker server. Our FileMaker server is on a Selient Cloud server, which is on Amazon. And we'll be live connecting to it. So data synchronization considerations. What are some of the things you need to think about? If you've never tackled this before, there's a lot to think about. First off, how are you going to know what you're going to sync? How are you going to ensure data integrity, meaning that you don't have only some of the data gets posted back, or only some of the data got downloaded that you expected, and therefore you're making choices about your work and you don't have the whole picture? How will you handle deletes? How will you process deletes? Deletes can be a very time-consuming thing to process depending upon which way you elect to handle it. So we've got some strategies. How will you handle collisions? Collisions meaning that the same record got changed by 2 different people. So who's going to win? What are going to be our business rules for who's going to win under what circumstances? There's a lot to think about there. How will you handle container data? The iPhone takes beautiful, very large pictures, and they're big in size, and they take a while to transfer. So how are you going to deal with that? And most importantly, how will you keep your sync process fast enough that all the effort you just invested turns out to be not fast enough to be functional for the people that are trying to use it? Is your head spinning already of all those things? Know that there are slides at the end that talk about how some of the solutions I'm showing address those issues. And I originally had that group of slides at the front, and then I went, they're all going to be in a coma with their head down if I show this many slides at the beginning. So I pushed them to the end. But these I think we need to talk about quickly here. So strategies for sync. My first strategy is a 0 strategy. It's not one of your actual strategies. It's called make sure you really, really, really have to do it. So a good way to handle sync, to handle a mobile application, is to go ahead and make a dedicated mobile app that you intend to load with data, but instead of loading it with data, make external relationships to the real data and put it up on the server. So users are just opening up that mobile file and it has a data for external data on the server. And then you can go out in the world and try it. So build your mobile app first with real connections. It makes it easier to develop, right, because you're still on the server. Plus, you can test it. Have the users test it in the real world situation. If you're a consultant or an in-house developer, talk them into letting you go to the environments and go with the people a little bit. Test with your own iPad, test with your own iPhone if it's a smaller device. So make sure you really need it first. Another thing you might consider as an alternative to sync is to move your server out to the cloud. Now you might say, why would I put it in the cloud? Well, a lot of times the broadband that you have at a company is not really fast enough to be hosting out to the world. It doesn't have the upload capacity. So if you were to move your server out to FileMaker Cloud, to 360works also does AWS hosting, to Slant Cloud, any of them, or roll your own on AWS. If you were to do any of those, it's possible that now that thing will be so fast that you'll still be fine in the office, right? So you can try it, right? You can spin it up, move it up there, and give it a shot as a trial. Okay, strategy 1. Architect your schema for sync. So first off, always use UUIDs when you're going to tackle sync. If you tell me I have an old system and it doesn't have UUIDs, I'm sorry. Do the work to get it to UUIDs, because it's a nightmare when things go wrong and it starts colliding if you don't. So a UUID is a unique, universal unique identifier or unique universal identifier. I lose track of my U's, but what it means is it's a very long, obnoxious either text or number, depending upon which one you pick. And it's so long that it is statistically so unlikely that it would be duplicated that you're okay. But it's not pretty to see. But use that under the hood for all your relationships. You can still give them a pretty ID up on top, right? You can still give them a little record number, but that no longer is the primary key of that table. And you no longer use it in relationships. Okay, fewer fields per table. So when you start to think about what you're going to pull down, a lot of these tables have gotten big over the years. Do you really need all of that? Or for that job, do you only need fewer columns? And you could put fewer columns in your mobile offline file. Does that do I hear an amen? Hallelujah. Am I preaching? Here we go. Consider aggregating history. This is an interesting idea. Sometimes people need some history, but what they really need is, I need the list of invoices over the last 2 years for this client. I don't really need every invoice and every line item down with me. So what if you aggregated it into a text blob, a text field that just said, on this date I had this invoice, it was this amount, it's been paid. And I just had this little list, and I could roll that up onto the company record. So now I've got 2 less tables to sync, right? Strategy 2, specialized mobile app. I think I've already alluded to that, but think very narrowly about the work those people are going to do and only give them what they need to do their work. You don't need to give them the whole system. They don't need to know what the sales rep in California is doing when they're in Indiana, okay? And think of it this way. Do you really want someone, or tens or 20s of someone, running around out there with your entire business on an iPad that could get lost or could get stolen, or that they could try to take to a competitor if they're disgruntled, right? That's a huge security risk that you really need to lock down. And I'm not saying you don't secure it, but the best one is don't ever give it to them in the first place. Only give them what they need to know. Strategy 3, minimize the data that you sync. So we talked about columns being narrower, we talked about the tables being focused, but also limit the history. Do they really need to know everything that client has done in the last 20 years? Or do they really only need to know the last year? Right? Do they only need to know the work they're scheduled out for several days or just today? The smaller you can make it, the less sync you're doing, the faster it'll run. The less you're syncing, the faster it'll run. And then Identify some data that can be viewed on demand. Just because you have an offline app doesn't mean it can't have a way that if they are on the network, they could access some of the stuff that's on the server. So it could be almost a hybrid, right? It's an offline app, and you can do jobs A, B, and C when you're offline. But then if you need to view something, you could see it when you are online. Do you see what I'm saying? Could be a hybrid. Okay, strategy 4, seed the mobile app. This means instead of taking down a clone to the device, put some of the data, the archive data, in it already. So now you're just transferring. Yes, it's a bigger app, but it'll be better than transferring and importing or syncing data. Does that make some sense? You can seed it. 360works on Friday just announced a new feature, a new version to their MirrorSync that will help you seed the data. Because the data getting stale, somebody sets up, we had one client where somebody set up sync for them, their in-house person who has since left. They set it up, now it's been 2 years later. So their seeded amount of data is now 2 years behind. So now all of a sudden, the syncing tool isn't working very well because it's like, oh my God, you need 2 years of stuff and it's crashing. So you have to remember it requires maintenance to update your seed and get it ready. Okay. Number 5, push actions to the server. So any of the processing that you can use perform script on server, or even just stick it in a table and then let a scheduled script do the processing. Right? So for example, if you're going to make a PDF and send out invoices or something, wouldn't it be better if that were done on the server? Send it out that way. Okay. And the last strategy I have for you, manage deletes. So there's a couple of ways that you can handle it. My idea is, unless they created that record on their local device, don't let them delete it, because it's cumbersome. But if you really need to, if they need to be able to delete, then do one of two things. Either don't delete it, just flag a field that says, I'm deleted. So the record's still there, but it's marked as deleted. You can use conditional formatting and other scripting rules to keep them from making changes to it now. Okay, and that way, that can sync back to the server. If you really need to delete a record or delete the record back on the server, try making a sync log. So that's one table, and it has columns for, here's my primary key, here's the name of my table, here's the person who deleted me, and then delete it. So now, when it's time to sync, you can just look through the log and see what was deleted since my last sync, and you can delete it in your system. What you don't want is your system to try to be comparing, well, let me see, I've got 100,000 records here, I've got 100,002. Which 2 are missing? And then it has to go through everything to try to figure it out. Right? Okay. So, scripting methodologies. Perhaps one of you brilliant people will have something else to say about it, but it seems to me that it really comes down to 3 techniques inside FileMaker right now, without maybe using the data migration tool or something. You can import data. You can use a transactional model, which means making changes in portals and then committing it at once. So all the changes you make in a portal are committed at one time. That's a transaction. Or you could use a web service. So the web services, FileMaker supports XML, JDBC, and the brand new FileMaker Data API. So we could make use of those. Or some combination of these 3. Okay, demo time. So I've got a couple, if you look at the slides, it looks ridiculous. There's like 1 billion slides to create this demonstration here, but this isn't the demonstration, by the way. This is just to explain what's happening. Then we'll demo. So we've got the mobile file. It's called Jobs Mobile, and it's on the iPad. And we've got on the server hosted, up in the cloud, on Slide Cloud, Jobs Master. I'm just going to call them mobile and master because I'm tired of saying jobs already now. So in between the two, I've created a new FileMaker database, and I call it Sync Model 1. And it's called 1 because this is the first one. That's the only reason. It's the first one I'm showing. And it has relationships to both mobile and the master. It has external data sources. So that means it's only an interface file, and I can have table occurrences from mobile and table occurrences from master and layouts in it, so all the syncing logic is in this file for this model. Okay? Are you with me so far? Are we good? Okay. Now, it's for downloading. We're going to handle downloading by just doing an import. And you're going to say, but that's not transactionally safe. Well, remember, I'm downloading it to my iPad. Nobody else can be using it. Nobody else can be using those records, right? So I can import to it safely. I just need to know the counts. I expected 20 jobs, I got 20 jobs. Right? So I could use import. Why would I use import? Because it's simple and because it's fast. And you're saying import's slow? Well, not by comparison. Import's pretty fast. So for download, I'm going to import. And I'm going to treat, for Model 1, I'm going to treat sync as two things. In the morning, I download my work, I go do my work, and at the end of the day, I upload it. I'm not going to assume that my work for tomorrow is already there. So I'm going to make those two separate things, and I'm going to do them two separate ways. Okay. So for upload, I'm going to use small transactions. So do you remember what that is? We're going to loop and use a portal and commit the records. And I say small transaction because I'm going to loop through the work orders and commit each work order plus its related tasks as one action. But that way, each work order goes up. If work order 1 and 2 and 3 go up and then I get a phone call, I didn't lose my place. Or if one of the records was locked out of the 6 things I worked on, I don't end up with the whole thing staying down. Only the one record that I can't commit, meaning the one work order package, work order and its actions. Okay. I'm going too slow, so I'm going to start speeding up. Okay, so before FileMaker 17, this sync helper file had to be on the local device. Why? Because it's linking to the mobile, and it had to have a hard-coded relationship to mobile, so it just had to be file, and here I am, I'm right next door. But now with FileMaker 17, it's a beautiful thing. We now have the ability to put that sync file on the server, and here's how. We can now define that extended external data source via a global variable. So mobile can say, hey, sync, do this job for me, here's who I am, here's where I'm at, and pass it the path. And when sync opens, it first a script is called, the one that it's called has no steps that are going to impact with mobile yet. So it isn't trying to go to a layout, it's not trying to go to one of those records or anything. It receives that in its parameter, it loads it in the variable, and then it starts doing the sync. So as long as you set the path before the first time you need it, you're in good shape. But now this sync logic can be on the server. So now we have one less file that I have to get down to the mobile device and perhaps update if there's a problem, right? Or if I have new features or something. Are you with me? So you can see it. So over there is my iPad. If I do this, so you can see it's my iPad. All right. It's empty. I have no company, no work orders, nothing. Up on my server, I have jobs master, right? I have my master file. Plus I have my sync file up there. So now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click my download button, and I'm going to choose to do my import method. Oh. So it's not on, but it gotta be on the Wi-Fi if it opened the file. Okay. All right, let's try it this way. So let's pretend that my laptop is my remote device, and I'm still gonna talk back to that server. The only difference with this one is that I hadn't already truncated all the tables, so I'll do that now. Okay. And we're logged in. Okay, so let's download now. We'll do the import. Okay, so we brought down 30 companies, 51 work orders with 260 tasks in 7 seconds. Okay, import's pretty fast. And that's in this room with this network.
Is that a single table?
No. No, that's actually, well, 4 tables. I'm choosing not to do invoice. I aborted the mission along the way as I was getting ready, so no invoices are coming. But it's bringing down companies, work orders, and tasks. And I'll show you the code in a minute. So there we go. We've got our work orders. I can mark them as done. I got some work done there. Since I can't sign it on my iPad, I'm going to drop a signature file. Okay, we'll do one more. Okay. And it's done. Okay. So let's go back to, so now we have 2 done and we're ready to upload. So we're going to upload via transaction. Okay, so we pushed up 2 work orders, 10 tasks, almost 5 seconds. So part of the trick with sync is when you're pushing back your work, push back little bits if you can. You know, if they get back at the Starbucks on Civilization at lunchtime, then let them push something out. Okay. So now I'm going to open up the sync file and let's look inside a little bit quickly. Okay. So this file, the syncing for this version, you're going to get all the code. Okay, so you can rip it apart. Yeah, that's the name of the server. I was kind of happy with that. I liked sticks. But. Okay. So the syncy goodness, so there's a couple things that happen. So first we'll catch up Mark for what's going on there. So these are the sync scripts, but I don't actually call this script. I call the button request. And I tend to hook all my buttons to one thing anyhow, and they funnel through. So the button request has a bunch of ifs, and it calls the appropriate subscript based on what came in. And that allows me to do things like front-end it with a back button and stuff like that. It lets me front-end some navigation. Plus, it lets me have some junior person start doing all the layouts and putting in the parameters for the request, but not, it doesn't actually work yet. All the button says is, I don't know what this is, until it does know what it is. So anyhow, so when the button request comes in, it's not looking for the mobile file yet, right? So let's look at our relationships. See, it's just a variable. So parameter comes in, variable gets set, and then when that update or download script gets called, the path is valid now. So all the path is, all you have to pass in is, it's very simple. It's just the location of the file with the name. It's just its own path. So that's a one-step command to get your own location. If you have any questions, please come up to the mic. They asked us to do that just so that it will be on the recording. Okay. So then download is just going to layouts that are specific for the master. So it loops through all the master records. It finds the employee it needs, And to be very honest right now, I've hacked that part of the security. It's just looking for me, because I wanted to be full access, but yet find my employee record. So it finds my record, it finds the work orders then that were assigned to my employee ID, it finds the companies that go with those work orders, and it finds the tasks that go with those work orders. Okay? So we just go to the layout, and then down here we go to the layouts for mobile that are inside this file and do imports from one to the other. So from employee to employee. So it's not transactional because we're bringing in all the employees we want, then all the work orders, then all the tasks, but we're just importing. 5 import steps. Is everybody with me? Are we okay? Okay. I'm not going to go any deeper than that for that part. How many of you are familiar with the concept of a transaction, processing a transaction? Okay, good. So it's about half, maybe over half. Good. All right. So it's just looping. It's just looping through the records. We loop through the work order, and within that, we loop through its tasks. Here's what the layout looks like. Oops, that's a little too close. Okay. So we've got the work orders. So we're in a context that's just transaction. It's a made-up table, okay? Resource table. We've got the master stuff over here and the other here, so we can read them and write them right here, and then commit, and it goes in at 1. Does that make sense? All right. So that's for the update, when we receive the data back. Okay. We don't really receive data back. We go here, and we see what we need, and we put it in with set field steps. Am I clear enough? I can see a lot of confusion. Okay. You're going to see a little more of that in a minute. Let's move on to our next model so that we get through the good stuff, because you're going to want model 4, I think. Okay. Okay, so model 2. We still have server, we still have the device, same problem. But this time we're going to solve it with a commercial product called GoZync by Geist Interactive. Okay? So GoZync also has helper files. They call them, it has 2 of them actually. It calls it GoZync Mobile, and you put that on the pad. And it also has a helper file. Oh, I'm sorry. So that one on the mobile is going to have external data source references to your master and your mobile. Does that sound familiar? Right, it's a helper file. It also has a second helper file for configuration that's up on the server, and that one's called GoZync hosted. It walks you through the whole process. They have a pretty nice video that step-by-step does it. They managed to do it in 25 minutes. It took me more like an hour and a half, but that's okay, because they're doing like one table, and they know what they're doing. But they have step-by-step instructions, and they have a video, so you follow along with. And what's involved is you create relationships, you are going to paste some scripts, you're going to paste a table, you're going to paste some fields. So you'll go into their example file, copy a set of fields, and then go to your table and paste them onto all your table. Okay? And what GoZync does is it does transactions. It's completely native FileMaker. But it does add to that, it extrapolates it. It extrapolates it. So it's loosely coupled. It adds some abstraction to the whole process. And it also adds a lot of very nice logging. GoZync Mobile not only has relationships to mobile and your master that you'll create, it also has relationships to the GoZync hosted. Okay. I'm not going to spend as much time looking at the frameworks because they're commercial products that you can go look at their website, and I give you a link to it, and they have tutorials and free trials and the whole works. I mostly want to make you aware of it. So in this case, being that the iPad isn't working so well, let's imagine that this is my iPad. I have my Jobs Mobile, and next to it I've deployed GoZync Mobile. And I've got GoZync hosted up on my server next to my master. I'm going to quickly truncate my table. By the way, truncate is a wonderful friend to syncing. How many of you love truncate? Have you used it yet? Oh, I love truncate. If you don't know what it is, truncate is a new step. It's like delete, except it just drops the index. It's just done now. It doesn't try to figure out what's related to what. It does not observe the cascading delete. It just drops all the record in that one table. So you can loop through your tables very quickly and get rid of them without seeing that pesky delete dialog while FileMaker tries to figure out all the places it has to update. It's a wonderful thing. I think it came in 16. But to be very honest, the versions are starting to smear together. I remember this. I remember saying, woo, buttons. So it's been a long time. Okay, so let's run GoZync. Now, GoZync is a little bit different. This time, we're going to do the round trip. So it's first going to try to upload any changes that I have on my mobile device back to the master, and then bring down my work. It's going to do the round trip. What would happen if it did it in the other order? I would lose my data, right? Because the master would just overwrite all the work I did before I pushed it up. So it does it as a round trip. So maybe that's not a bad thing, because it keeps me from goofing up and downloading before I uploaded, right? But it's spending a little bit of time. Okay, so here we go. We're going to bring down our records. So it brings up a nice message window. Oh, I just opened it again. It's in trial, so it's warning me. I get a progress bar, so this time I'll be bringing down 34 company records. Now, it's not doing an import. Remember, it's doing a transaction for those also. Company is a transaction, work order is a transaction. So transactions take a little bit longer. It isn't that GoZync that's a problem. That's the disadvantage of transactions when you're trying to bring down lots of data. In my opinion, it works really well for uploading the bits of work that changed. But it depends. The beautiful thing about a transaction is it really preserves data integrity. It's very high on data integrity, and that's good. Import isn't. But if you're just downloading to your iPad, I'm not sure that's such a risk. Does that make sense? Okay. So it has the very same layouts. You will have to do some maintenance because the layouts, GoZync requires certain layouts, and it will use the fields on those layouts to know what to sync. So if you add new fields, you need to go back and do some maintenance on your layouts and remember to add them. So as you add sync, regardless of which way you do it, code you wrote yourself or a framework, you're going to have some maintenance to make sure you keep it current so that it's bringing down new fields that you've added. You have to always keep that in your mind. Wait a minute, I'm doing sync, this impacts the sync, I've got to go update the sync. Oh, I meant to show you that. It also GoZync does some very nice logging. And it has a system for helping you to deploy the file to the iPad, which is a very nice feature. But it's all native FileMaker, so this is basically using like export from container field. It's just that it's all stuff that you probably, if you could write, but it's a lot of code, right? It's a lot to write, so. And it's been tested, it's been around a while now, so. I've seen it struggle when the data set gets too big. And sometimes that happens 2 years up the road or something. So it looks good for 6 months and then you got a problem. But that's true with all sync, isn't it? It looks fine for a while and then they want more and more old data and then it's a problem. So, Model 3. So here we are, we're back with our mobile and our master. This time, we're going to use a web service. We're going to use a commercially available web service called MirrorSync by 360 Works. MirrorSync can be installed. It's a web service that can be installed, a web application that can be installed on the FileMaker server, or it could be installed on its own server. That server could even be a Linux server. Of course, it could be Mac or Windows, just like, you know, us FileMaker server is. In my case, I'm going to put it on my FileMaker server. And I've also made another one of those little sync help me files. So this is my file. I made it so I could extrapolate my relationships. I could take my relationships out, just like I did in Model 1. I have a sync file, and it has relationships to the master, but not to mobile. And MirrorSync sits between them and is going to do the request. So MirrorSync will know how to talk to mobile, and it'll know how to talk to my sync file. Okay? So it allowed me to put my business logic in one place. MirrorSync only talks to the sync file, and it has table occurrences to the master. But the way it does the requests, it's a web service. So it's using the URL request. And it can be configured to either use JDBC or XML. There's pros and cons of both. There's advantages and disadvantages. They document them pretty well on the website, so I don't want to go into much detail. But it has to do with pre-finds and also how complicated the finds are. Generally, the JDBC is faster. And like I said, it's a web application that was written in Java. So that's a Java dependency. Some people aren't so happy, but it's not Java dependency on the local device, only on the server. So it's contained to the server that it's running on. Even if you put MirrorSync on a different server, you're still going to have to put part of it on your FileMaker server so that it can talk and download. Okay, so here's a version. It's a different copy of Jobs Mobile. Unlike GoZync wanted me to add very specific fields. So even though I had a modification timestamp field, it wanted it to be named a certain thing. So I had to put a second one in. I had to copy and paste its fields. MirrorSync lets me map to my fields. So I didn't necessarily have to add different ones. But you are going to have a modification timestamp, and you're going to have primary keys that are, well, MirrorSync has a feature where it tries to map for you. So it'll say, oh, your number 2 is the server's number 3. It starts to create this map, but if that map gets hosed, you're in trouble. So my advice is back to the original slides, use UUIDs. They even say on their website, this is maybe not a good idea if you have a lot of data. Okay. You'll see that I've already brought down a lot of data on this one, so let's, oops, that one's already down. So I've got some history on here, not just my current one. Let's go to one that isn't done. Check off a few things, grab a signature, okay. This is an incredibly unfair test, because I'm uploading one record, it's doing its connection. Okay. So this is a very nice feature of MirrorSync. It's warning me that that record was already modified, because remember, I've been doing syncs from these other versions of the devices. So it's warning me that I've already changed that record. And it gives me a really nice interface to resolve it on a website. Unfortunately, it's not going to show in here. When I tried to do it earlier, it said it couldn't connect. Yeah. But I think it has to do with my server being behind a firewall. I think that's the problem. But it has a very nice interface for doing that. So it'll help you to resolve the issue. So when you set up MirrorSync, let me show you a few screenshots of it. It walks you through a really nice wizard. It asks you questions. You know, will you directly connect in different time zones? You fill out these things. These white areas here are actually big buttons. So where's your primary key? I would say always choose developer manage, because that means you're going to use your UUIDs. MirrorSync managing can mean it's doing that magic table thing like, oh, I know, your number 2 is this one's number 3. Okay. So you just walk through the dialogues. It has this interface for, it actually discovers it pretty well, but you choose what your primary keys are, what is your modification timestamp. This thing's kind of wide. It scrolls across to both tables. I mean, both versions, the mobile and the master. And you tell it about the relationships. So my ID, contact ID in this table is the ID field of the contact table. So you're mapping your foreign keys to your primary keys, okay? It actually creates this little grid to show you, okay, these are what I think all the relationships are. And, you know, saves the changes. So as it builds out things, it actually writes scripts, loads them onto your clipboard and says, okay, it's ready for you to go paste it. So it has scripts that have been built with your information for what you need to do that web service request. It's really very cool. I unfortunately don't think it's a good idea for me to give you that file. They will give that to you for free for, you know, download. I mean, I said that wrong, for trial. But I want you to go to their website and get registered with them and get connected with them if you're going to investigate MirrorSync. So I don't want to, you know, I wouldn't give away their code. So, but I could show you. I want to show you just how much is there. And there's so much in GoZync too. It's really amazing when you, let's look at there, and this is 3, so we'll look at sync model 3. Okay. So it'll give you a whole folder, the MirrorSync folder that you drop in at once. And then it has, some of the scripts have setup and customization places, so like places you can do a pre-find, things like that. And then this is the actual sync baby. So it builds all this for you. Look at where my scroll bar is up here. Look, I'm hardly even started. I'm just filling out variables, right, you know? So it built that. See, do you notice it has, I mean, it built this to work with my tables, what I told it, where my server was, what my mobile is. Do you get it? So it builds it, loads it on your clipboard. So that's very cool. It's a web service, and it runs pretty fast. Yes? Yes. If you have a change, you're going to rebuild the one script. Not all of it. The ones that you customize, you can retain, but this big one has to get rebuilt, so you have to go through the wizard again. So you do an update. Most of it, you're going to say yes, 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 and then here's the one little thing that changed, and then rebuild it. But it's going to require maintenance. So none of these are the magic sync device, you know, that you just, it just reads your mind, it knows what you want to sync, and it just gets it all right, and it keeps it up to date for you. Okay, so whether you're writing code yourself or you're using one of the frameworks, you need to know what they're doing, get familiar with them, and you need to remember to update. Okay, regardless of which one it is. Okay, I have one last one to show you. Here we are back at that slide. We've got mobile, we've got master. And this time, I've got another sync file called sync model 4. It's very creatively named. It's going to reside on the local device. And this time, it has external data sources only to the mobile file. And when it comes time to communicate with master, it's going to use the data API, which is awesome. And I think it's only going to get better as they add more features to it. So it's going to send out a request with JSON as a payload. The request is in the form of JSON, and also the data it gets back from the API is in JSON. How many of you went to the intro to data API session today? Today? Yesterday? It's all a blur now, but good. I would say when the videos come out, Watch that one. Data API is going to be important. Okay? So it gets back JSON. I'll show you what JSON looks like in a minute. And then you have to do something with the JSON to get it into records. But the beautiful thing is it's now on the device. It's a big chunk of text on the device, and it got there very quickly. We're going to parse it as a transaction into our mobile file. But did anybody see any sessions on web viewers and showing JSON, or doing JavaScript in web viewers with data tables or something like that? I think there was a training session on it. Well, one possible alternative is when we get back our JSON, what if we display it in a web viewer and we only put it in records when we actually need it? That's a possibility, right? So we show it in a web viewer. When they click the record, we go, oh, I know what you want. I'll grab that and make the records for it, or even a temporary portal-y way, right? And just roll it back into the JSON. So that's a possibility. One that I cannot show. I can just show unpacking the records today. So that's for download. Download, we send a little payload request that tells it what we want. We get back JSON, we unpack it as a transaction. Upload, we have to kind of do the reverse. We have to take the records we changed and make JSON, and then send it to the master. But here's the wonderful thing about the data API. It's basically transactional. So I could send it, the work order plus the task, as one JSON chunk, send it to the layout, and it knows what layout with the portals, and it'll just do it. It's a beautiful thing. So prepare the JSON, upload it. Okay. My iPad keeps wanting to talk to iTunes. Okay, so Model 4, we're back to Model 1 then. And this is one that I'll be giving you. So we've got Jobs Mobile. Okay, I'm going to, again, truncate all the data. So now all our tables are empty. Okay. Let's hit download, and I'm going to choose the data API. It's hitting the server with a request, telling it what it wants. The server returned JSON, and then on the layout, I looped and created the records as transaction. About the same amount of data. Took 7.5 seconds, the bulk of which was me processing the data, right? Unpackaging it. But it's once I've already got it all down, right? Now the data API is going to return by default 100 record chunks. So you will have to, if you're trying to bring down more data, you're going to have to bring it in chunks and loop. Loop through chunks, okay? So let's again make a couple changes. I said the data API is transactional. It is with the exception of container data. You can't send a container field as part of that JSON. Not unless you were to encode it, like 64-bit encode it. But, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. So you could do that, but otherwise, you have to send them separately as individual file requests. That's what I'm doing here. So I'm sending all of a work order with its tasks. When that works, I also send the signature. And then I move on to the next work order. Okay, almost out of time. So it uploaded that one work order in the task in 1.5 seconds back to the server. So let's look at the scripts. Remember, Sync Model 4 is deployed to the device. Why did I deploy it to the device? I could make an external connection to it, Why did I do that? Well, because if it's up on the device, all I did was send the data API to another place on the server, and now I'm doing the unpacking transaction over the network, right? But if my sync file is local on my device, the data API brought it all the way down to my device, and now I'm doing all the unpacking right there. That's why. So it's a big advantage. It made a difference. It was about twice as fast. Okay, and that's when I was at home on my fast network. So when you're working with the data API, which one did it want? Yeah, it wants jobs mobile. Okay. So here are my scripts here that I've written that you get for acting with the data API. So whenever you interact with the data API, you first have to log into it, and if you're successful, it gives you back a token, which is a big long string. And then from then on, each request, you send that token back to say, this is who I am, here you go. The token is good for 15 minutes since your last transaction. So every time you successfully do a transaction, it resets the 15 minutes. So you're okay if you're processing a bunch in a row, you're gonna be okay. But you need to check how long it's been, and you might have to authenticate again if it's been beyond that 15 minutes. So first, we're gonna log in. I'm not gonna try to train you on the data API right here, but basically you log in. Here's the script for downloading. So this downloading script calls the login. Can you kind of see it? Is that better? Okay. It sets a bunch of stuff in variables for the path, and then the JSON payload. The JSON payload is basically the find request when you're asking for data. So I'm telling it that I want work orders where the status is open and the account name is my acting account name. Remember, because I'm in this full access, so I'm just pretending I'm this account. Okay. Here's the URL and the curl options, so you do each one separately, because they're separate places on the dialog that you have to fill in. So it's just header. We're passing in the token we got back in the JSON payload. The data API is pretty good, and it has all this stuff. There's also another resource I'll show you in a second. And then I just insert from URL and I send the request, and it returns JSON. Here's what the JSON looks like. So the top part is always a message. So it's basically name value pairs, and the square bracket means everything inside it. You know, we've got a hierarchy here. So I get back the message. The message includes a code, which is an error code, 0, and a message, which is okie dokie. And then I get my data. So within the whole data structure, field data is whatever table I asked for, in this case, work order. And here's my name value pairs. So there's all my very ugly UUIDs, right? Plus, I also get back portal data. So here's the company that's related to that work order. So this part is my name of my table occurrence. So we use anchor buoy, so WL means work order to company, and then here's the name of the field. Does that make some sense, right? So we're getting back the company, we get back the employee, and then a group of tasks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's all the tasks. Now I'm starting the next work order. So in the same way that XML could have, you know, all this data, so does JSON in name value pairs. So then I just have to parse this using those new JSON functions that came out in FileMaker 16. Let's wrap up real quick. So I've got a couple, I've got like 2 minutes. So yep, there's my 2-minute warning, very nice. Okay, sync framework comparison. So I've got a table here that just compares them a little bit. GoZync, MirrorSync, and one I didn't talk about, a third commercial product, is Sync Server Pro. I didn't talk about it because it doesn't work with mobile. But it's great if you are using it on a tablet with FileMaker Pro, or if you're doing server to server. You could use it as a syncing option to keep multiple servers. It used to be called Sync Deck a few years ago before it was purchased. FileMaker, let's see, so GoZync and MirrorSync both work with the FileMaker iOS SDK. That's good to know. And GoZync is just native FileMaker. It doesn't work with other databases, but MirrorSync and Sync Server Pro do. So if you also have other syncing needs, then you might want to consider one of those frameworks, because you could also talk with, SQL Server and stuff. So, okay. The technology. Only GoZync is transactional of these. Okay, so those questions we had at the beginning. Okay, so how will you know what to sync? My preferred way, when I can, is to make it that I flagged it. I know by a status. It's assigned to me, and it's ready to go, so I bring it down, I do the work, and when I make it done, that's when it goes back. Okay? But a way that is often used, it's used, with GoZync and MirrorSync, they use the timestamp, so you see what changed. So if you're going to use timestamps, use get current time UTC milliseconds. That means it makes a straight time for, regardless what time zone you're in, it's going to make the same time number. Okay. And then also it's a good idea to have a way to do full refresh, because at some point you're going to want to, if you're really doing sync, you're going to want to just fully refresh it. Okay. So how will you ensure data integrity? So when you post the work, you could set a post timestamp so that you know that's when it came in. You could confirm that the expected data was downloaded. So on my import one, data integrity is the thing I got to protect, right? So remember I went to each layout and I did a find in master? Well, I could write in a variable, company, I'm bringing down 20, and work orders, I'm bringing down 27, and I send that little bit. I could stick it in a global field, right, that's on the mobile, or a field, because I have relationships to it. So I could load that even before I start doing the imports. So when it's done, it could make sure it got it all. I already told you about delete. Logical delete is the idea that you don't really delete it, you just hide it from them. So you have to build things into your interface. I told you about the delete log already. So how will you handle collisions? So you need business rules. You need to think about this. Who's going to win? And divide the table if you can. That will be faster than it trying to say, well, we'll use the name you said, but we'll use the new shipping directions they said. Okay? But the best way, I think, is to prevent collisions. So you have to, as much as you can say, maybe you flag the record to say it's been checked out and it's being worked on in the field, and you don't allow it to be edited then on the server until it's checked back in. You could do things like that. Actually, they have a great example of that in the GoZync demo. They have a really nice work order demo that does check in and check out. How will you handle container data? So you could 64-bit encode it. So that means you use a function that turns it into this massive text thing, and then when you get to the other side, you recompile it into a file. The problem is you lose metadata. You lose the name of the file, so make sure you get that and pass that along with. And if you're capturing signatures, part of the beautiful thing of the signature capture is you're getting location and some other metadata. When it goes back together in FileMaker, it's now just a picture. And it's a picture of their signature, but if part of the stuff was to prove that you signed it in this location on this date. So you lost some of that. Okay, and photos are big. You might consider having them use their camera. Just leave the pictures there and post them when they get back to the office, directly into the database. You don't necessarily have to put that in Go, if they can keep straight which pictures go to which. Okay, so here's all the resources. There's a session coming up here at 5:30 today, using FileMaker Go for mobile data acquisition. That might be of meaning to you. Here are links to the commercial sync products I talked about. Here's some good help documentation on FileMaker Go Development Guide and the Data API Guide and Transforming Your Service Business. Beeswax has a couple of really nice blog posts right now that are talking about using the Data API inside of FileMaker in the way I did. It was very helpful. And also they have one about using it for transactions, so that's cool. We have a bunch of resources. If you've never been to SalientConsulting.com website, we have blog posts. We also have Salient TV. We do some web videos, so new features when things come out, so check that out. One of the tools, I don't know if he's in the room, Mislav Kos, one of my coworkers, wrote a very cool tool for creating test data. And I use this for this file. So you just set it up with, it has a bunch of custom functions. It's all native FileMaker, and you just say, I have 500 records, loop, and make sample data for me. And it's pretty cool. And you can just build it into your file. And finally, Salient Cloud, we do hosting. Amazon Web Services, and we just had a session earlier about it. So thank you. That's it.